I dropped the ball. I had the wrong scene selection set up. So I've been looking at
Oh, the outro music.
no the I had the wrong. I said evening edition.
Oh shit.
I've corrected this. So I've been looking at these DIY piezo equipment noise instruments, like noise boxes, where they put some kind of transducer inside. Some of them have magnetics and strings, but most of the time it's just like a you know something that just picks up vibrations and got springs and makeshift kalimbas and real wild stuff. And sometimes they have a built-in reverb tank too, and they're not much bigger than like a cigar box, which I find even more entertaining because they're not that big. I was just looking at one that's made out of old tools like jigsaw blades and reciprocating saw blades, and it's just there's a real wild microcosm of these just noise machines. Here's another one. It has a candy cane, a toothbrush, tongue depressor, and a drill bit. and
Super random.
and yeah, and so like at first glance, just noise box, DIY noise box is all I searched for. And some of these things, like at first, it's like, yeah, okay, what are they gonna make with this? And then there was one. It's Noisebox 9 demo reel. Great for ambient, electronic, SFX, electroacoustic music, movie scoring. And the first minute of it is just showing what each individual component sounds like. But then the last half of it, or the last bit of it, is like a performance. And it's just like it's one of those things that reminds me that atonal music can be just absolutely gratifying in that moment. I'm not sure how long I could listen to it though. Maybe like 3 or 4 minutes at the most. But I think that like subsequent listening is kind of limited. It's got to be like
It has its place, but it's not really meant to be
it's not the most forward facing component of any soundscape. It's
right. It's not meant to be the foreground.
yeah,
Period.
it's the atmospheric stuff that you barely notice, but gives space and dimension, some depth. But it's cool when it turns into like its own thing, like a music box, like a real creepy music box. All it needs is like a spinning ballerina that's like partially melted or something, just to complete the sonic aesthetic with the to provide a visual aesthetic to complete the sonic aesthetic.
Well, I mean, it feels like those things need to have very specific purposes.
Absolutely. Yeah, I don't think that these are. Yeah, 100% agree. I think these are like one-offs made just for a specific, role within. I don't know, sound design. Maybe there's a performance that utilizes these kinds of strange noises, like a stage performance, but they're using it for one very specific like character. I can't see one of these things being like a featured instrument. But maybe. I mean, I've found the featured instrument version of it on YouTube. It's just it has to be sequenced. There's like it's way too complicated. These things get used in such a way that it's. It makes me wonder: is it easier just to load samples into a sampler?
Sometimes I wonder if music concrete is like the audio version of Jackson Pollock in terms of if it's like a CIA psyop to make music worthless.
Oh man,
um,
fuck, if anything, it I think what it's like any kind of really revolutionary thing. It tends to galvanize the conservatory, and it tends to really refine the definition of what the conservatory is pushing. Because the conservatory embraces atonal music to a point.
I mean, 100%. Like it didn't at first, but now it's like the conservatory. In terms of it's not something that is the fringes of
Oh, it can't
music.
be.
It's like it's only coming from the
Yeah,
conservatory because it's so out of line with pop and mainstream music. It's like that's the only place it's being preserved, which is why it makes me think it was like a CIA psyop in the first place. Because it's the same thing with abstract art, like abstract art gets commissioned and it's in museums, but nobody in their right mind is out like, let me put this fucking splatter paint on my wall. Like, it's not there. It's not to say that abstract art doesn't have places in society, but it's not really mainstream, which is fine. But that's like, it's not. You're gonna see more Alex Gray or Ed Hardy in a regular person's art slash decorative collection than something that's like Damien Hirsch or whatever that modern douchebag's name is. I think that's his name. But it's like Damien Hirsch is like the embodiment of the modern day Jackson Pollock. And I'm fairly positive that's his name. But even that's because most people don't know who he is because he's like he would be considered fringe to the mainstream, but he's 100% in the conservatory and in this gallery uh couture where he's the thing that people pretend they get but nobody gets because it doesn't make any sense. And then it'll be he'll do something like put 100,000 cigarette butts on a table and like epoxy them in place, and like that will be the statement. But it's like, is this really visually, aesthetically? It don't even have to be pleasing. Is it even really doing anything other than just overwhelming with either size or numbers? And it's like most of the time, no. His stuff is just shock abstract, and then in that it's never good, but his shit sells for millions of dollars, tens of millions of dollars. So it's one of these things where the conservatory has fallen. I don't know if it was ever in favor, but people distrust it because of people like Damien Hirsch, where the conservatory celebrates abstract art and atonal music when they know nobody can dance to it or nobody can pull anything out of it because there's nothing concrete. So it it becomes this deconstruction of meaning through hyper focusing and hyper uh, extending some higher meaning to these things that don't actually have it. And by proxy, it actually brings down the meaningfulness of all of art because these people are going in and just making things with no with no inspiration and no connection to anything. Like, there needs to be something, like, whether it's a specific emotion or a specific event or a specific idea or something, and they're not doing that in a lot of these abstract art presentations. And then the end result is like a regular person sees the conservatory celebrating Philip Glass or Damien Hirsch, and then they're like, well, this sucks, so I'm not going to check out anything in the conservatory. And then the separation becomes even larger. So it's like seeing the way that the conservatory in music and visual arts have sort of carved out these gigantic uh, sacred spaces for very bad art. I don't blame regular people for not trusting them, but I also think it's one of these things where a lot of white men retreated to the conservatory and were average, and they were not like, it's the people who couldn't make it in the mainstream and then they retreated to the conservatory because the conservatory would reward them for being average white men. And so you get these spaces where it's like, yeah, a lot of these abstract artists are just white dudes who don't have anything to say. They don't have any real environmental, like, pressure in their lives. So it's like there's nothing interesting about them. They may have happened to have rich parents or have gone to a good art school, and then the prestige by proxy ends up getting these people where they're like celebrated for what is clearly mediocre or worse demonstrations of art in their fields. And it's like all of the, and don't get me wrong, I think there's a place for the Brian Enos and the Philip Glasses and the other guys, but the way the conservatory put them on this pedestal versus like the only places their music could ever be played is like airports and elevators, where you're not even, it's not even that you're hostage, it's that it's a liminal space. And so it's not destination music, it's transition music, where you're not listening to it because it's getting you somewhere, you're listening to it because you're in between places, which is like that's a place where it belongs. But I'd hate to be the person who's like best best example of their art in their field is only something that people would be half willing to pay attention to, and only when they're not necessarily forced to, but in a place where it makes sense for that thing to exist. Like the Chicago Bean,
Oh, the Millennium
there's
Bean.
there's not many places where that thing could exist and make sense. And even where it exists, it doesn't really make sense, because then somebody has to explain to you what it's trying to say. And you're like, oh, I guess. Okay. I guess. Sure. Yeah, sure. It says that. Sure.
It costs somewhere between $35,000 and $50,000 a year to keep that the Millennium Bean clean.
And don't get me wrong, I appreciate the craftsmanship that goes into creating something like that that looks like it doesn't have any seams or welding joints. But also the people who did that aren't the ones who get the acclaim is the problem then. Because then you find out that a lot of these artists, quote unquote, will come up with concepts and then they'll have other people do their work. And then it's like, how much can you actually attribute the work to them when they just conceived of it, but their hands weren't the ones that made it. And then it's like, okay, this is the not just Andy Warhol, but the notion that people can create art houses and the product get, because Da Vinci was part of the, it goes back very far. So it's not like Andy Warhol was like the first person to slap his name on some shit that he didn't actually do, but he told somebody to go do. But in the process, when the conservatory holds these people up and then regular people come in and find out that they didn't do all their work, then that makes the conservatory look worse. And so I think that's also where there has been a lot of undermining of integrity from within the conservatory. But again, I think that's because a lot of these mediocre white dudes came in and were like, oh, I'll never be able to compete with Jimmy Page or Jimi Hendrix, so I'm just going to go be a college professor and teach music theory.
Or just like history of rock and roll.
I mean, I feel like the people who teach history rock and roll aren't failed musicians more than like the people who love it, which it may be a mix of both. But this is where, again, like the conservatory, the history of rock and roll isn't even going to necessarily be in the music school. It's going to be in like a communication and culture class. And it's like, so that's where it's like to teach that course, it depends on where the course is placed within the university. So again, it's like a lot of those, like the history of the Beatles, I don't think that was in the music school. I think that was in like a communication and culture or something like that. So it's like, you don't have to be a musician to understand how the Beatles transcended the charts and became cultural phenomenon. And it's like those things about music, or like how they taught a class on Tupac's poetry, like that wouldn't have been in the music. Like there are things about musicians that then, if they make it into a college course, aren't necessarily going to be in a music school or a music class. And so that's where, to me, like it's there's people in universities who are teaching music theory and teaching things like production or digital music creation, but they've never actually been mainstream artists. And that's fine, because nobody goes to college to become a rock star. Like that's never been the trajectory of becoming that specific type of musician.
Most rock stars, if they do finish school, it's like well after their career is solidified.
Right, exactly. But
and the ones who started out in school leave school and then eventually they come back, but very rarely do they just stay in school the whole time. I think there's like a few examples, like the bass player for Queen, like was like, I'm gonna finish school, guys. I'm not sure if this is gonna work out.
Like Fish, Dream Theater.
Yeah, but Dream Theater all finished school like at Berkeley, which is music.
But that's my point. That's exactly my point. Is you should be able to get a Dream Theater out of Jacobs School of Music, but because nobody in Jacobs School of Music can actually play like Dream Theater, you're never going to get a Dream Theater from Jacobs. You're going to get one from Berkeley because it's so close to a lot of the areas that they have to have teachers that teach those things. But like there are musicians at IU School of Music who have toured, but they're in the minority, where it's like they're actually gonna be more on the fringes of the music school than one would expect. And they like I said, they definitely exist, but it's like they're not the ones that the music school highlights or gives any sort of influence, to the point that the one I was thinking of ended up not he ended up leaving the music school and working somewhere else at IU because he's like he toured with like Mariah Carey and has Grammys and shit, but the music school was just basically like cool, cool, good guy, awesome. And so he wasn't getting any sort of uh like grant or foundational capital, but he ended up getting it from another school within IU. So he didn't leave the university, but he definitely left the music school. But that's what I'm like, seeing that type of thing happen, it's no wonder that IU's music school isn't really producing anything of note. And that's to me where the conservatory produces symphonic level musicians who never are good enough to get acclaim on their own and need a symphony backing them to sound good, which is a problem. And so to me, this is like, it sounds awesome, like, oh, I'm a symphony player. But to me, a lot of times that means it's a musician who's not good enough to play on their own. Like, very few symphonic musicians could play up against Bruno Mars. And this is one of those things where it's like, it sounds crazy, but that's the reality of the conservatory creating a type of musician that does not feel music, and they have a rote understanding of notation and music theory, but they never actually get to the point of intuitively feeling the music, which is what mainstream people connect to. And that sort of intuitive expression of musicality that very stiff and soulless musicians never get to is one. It's the main reason somebody can be like a tonally perfect musician, but no one ever knows their name, because that tonally perfect musician never actually emotionally connects to any audience, and so nobody ever actually ends up listening to them. So
I think the dilemma with like technical virtuosity is that it's not the kind of thing that almost any like intermediate musician can compose a complex part and then learn how to perform it at a high level. But being able to play at that high level like intuitively and just improvise at a high level is actually really difficult. And I think for most people, that's like the threshold that will prevent people from engaging in like high level compositions, because when you're chasing after something that's unnecessary, it tends to put on blinders. I see a lot of like incredible technical demonstrations of guitar players like all the time. That's like what I like to watch the most, and I can't remember a single one of their names. Like I remember one out of 100 people, because it's like that. It's like one out of 100 performances is actually like, wow, holy cow, what was that? How did they combine that? What, like, and I genuinely think to myself, how the hell did they do that? Because most of the time I can hear that stuff and like, oh yeah, okay, I know what they're doing. Cool, that's really cool. A plus, but none of it's memorable. And
right.
the ones that are memorable, they're playing, and it's like the most simple expression on the instrument out of their entire catalog. It's like being the most like methodical and deliberate with note choices and letting things sing a little bit, and it's not some like flurry of video game noises.
Well, and to that point, I think it is.
I do like video game noises. I'm not saying I don't.
When you speak of complexity in composition, I think that there is um
I think of
And,
most of
and
that
there's
stuff as like a technical demonstration of an exercise and less as actual music, though, because
right,
I
but
don't
I
think
think
that
there's
person
an
is trying to be making music. They're just like, hey, look at this thing I can do. I can do these all these.
I
I can
don't
do
know if that's
gymnastics.
true, but that there I think there's an impulse to think that music that is more complex is quote unquote better.
No, it's
But
just more
there's
complicated.
also right, but even in that, the more complicated, the more difficult it becomes to remember. So then it's like, yeah, tell someone to hum a Jaco Pastorius melody or a Tim Henson melody, and they'll be like, what? They could be huge fans of those people,
The
and
Jocko
then
melody that someone's going to be able to hum is going to be Donna Lee, and it's going to be a Charlie Parker melody, and it's still going to be really fucking hard to hum because
yeah, so that
bebop is
doesn't
not.
count.
Yeah, bebop is still
That doesn't
fucking
even
hard.
count.
I mean, kind of,
That's not
sort of, not
not
really.
his. That's not his
It's not even
composition.
his. Yeah.
Yeah. Which again, that's what I'm saying is like an actual Jaco Pastorius composition where you're getting into a bunch of harmonics and
Yeah.
shit
How do
where
you
you're
sing
like,
harmonics?
exactly.
Like
Exactly.
you
How
gotta
do you
like.
sing harmonics? So then you're
No, I know.
ostracizing an entire
You
audience.
have to have a fucking helium balloon on hand.
Or you like tap your throat in between, you know, notes or whatever, and it's like
Yeah,
there.
it's like a talk box. There's a tube connected to the helium balloon, and you periodically let out and click your throat real hard, like you're trying to gleek. And I'm sorry. I was just talking to Sheila about. She was playing like the air trumpet, except it wasn't. It was like a combination air trumpet trombone. And I said, if you're playing the trombone, your trumpet, your hands would go here. And she said, I know, but that's my air trumpet. It's not like a real trumpet. And it occurred to me that like I've handled a lot of instruments and made them all make noises, and there's a way that you do that, and you have to learn that stuff. And I think in a lot of ways that's like those are really strange barriers because like the reality is I'm never going to compose for the tuba. And if I do use a tuba sound, it'll be from a keyboard. It'll be completely sequenced because I'm never going to develop
And
the
it's probably
honesty.
gonna be. It's
No,
probably gonna be to be funny.
yeah, and it's not
'Cause
going
that's
to
the
be.
only reason someone uses the fucking tuba
Yeah.
in modern times.
Like,
Like nobody uses the tuba
or
to be cool.
it would be layered with a bunch of other stuff to sound like a war horn or something undescribable, initially undescribable. You'd have to think about like what is that sound, but it wouldn't be used like a tuba. It wouldn't be a oot 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 sound. It would just be some long drone thing, probably treated really heavily with like a bunch of reverb and filters and give it something to make it sound alien. And then at that point, it's a synthesizer. I might as well just try and dial in a freaking
Yep.
FM synthesizer because at that point I've wasted as much time creating some otherworldly sound, doing sound design that's definitely not musical. It's never gonna sound like a tuba.
Well, this is where there's certain instruments now that have so much baggage where if a tuba is present, it's like, oh, there's a fat person on screen who's probably sloppy and like bumbling around.
Or
And
they're
then
built
it's
like a
like,
refrigerator and it's a
right,
sousaphone because we can't actually tell if it's one or the other.
exactly.
One of them is sitting and the other one's wandering around with a bunch of other people wearing outfits, and you can't tell because what's it even being used for other than oot, oot, oot.
But then that's like you can't have a trombone without implying erectile dysfunction. like other in in modern times, like yeah, if you put a trombone, it's like it's either going up or going down, and it's like one's sad and one's creepy, but like it's still funny. Where again, it's like, and then they'll use a one of those balloons that's meant for balloon animals as like a visual proxy. That's there you go. You just use a trombone in your media.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of
That's about
instruments
it.
like that have it's tough for them to break out into any kind of modern music framework because they come exactly if not baggage, they're just relegated to like effects sounds. It's not even I mean, I know that there are like folk music groups out there that still tour with like banjos and mandolins and tenor guitars, and they still play with like old timey variations of the instrument. But is that I'm pretty sure that that's not the driving force behind the music industry. Like everything that I experienced was folk instruments are kind of like a fancy. They're not a primary thing, for the few the the precious few who do want to like dedicate their lives to the banjo. Man, that's like there aren't that many. We would know about them, but it's usually like multi instrumentalists. Like people who pick up banjo now also play the guitar. They also play the bass. A lot of musicians today play like every fucking instrument, which is very impressive. On that they can learn how to play their instruments to the level that they can compose the music that they want to compose. That's the important part. But I remember meeting like composition majors at IU who were like make all they made was atonal music. Like it sounded interesting for a little while, and I remember one time I asked one guy, like, hey, can I like plug this into Reason and just hook up a bunch of synthesizers? And I was like, just it was awful. And a lot of that I think is that electronic music is really like bound like lockstep to the tempo, and I think a lot of really abstract or
I mean,
that
it
are,
used to be. It used to be, but then this is where
I mean there are tempo
circa
changes.
no,
Yeah.
no, no, circa like between 2010 and 2017, a tempo change almost became mandatory to the point that they were changing the tempo in ways where it wasn't like just doubling it. It would go from
Oh yeah. No, no. I mean
like 140 to
they were
120.
doing that in the bro step era. That was
Right.
like they were doing these hard ramps on the tempo and really cool stuff. Really cool stuff. Like I remember talking to an ambient producer at one point about manipulating synthesizer oscillation by manipulating, like on a global level, by manipulating the tempo. And that's like one of those things that you know th- there's a name for it. Fuck. Anyways, there's a name for this how to notate this on sheet music. And I've always thought it was interesting that like by the time that it actually appears, then it's like no long it's still lockstep to the tempo. It's just we have tempo changes.
Are you talking about quantization?
No, 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 no. I'm just talking about how like it's very common for tempo changes to occur in like within classical music and even in jazz. There's like all sorts of tempo changes, and even in disco there were lots of tempo changes. But then you get to anything with real instruments on the front end. There's always going to be some kind of floating time feel because humans aren't machines. But like the thing that was what I always thought was interesting about trying to hook up a synthesizer to some atonal music was that it always sounded too mechanical, and it wasn't like the really like extremely experimental electronic music that was pretty much noise. It was like it just didn't sound right. It's like let's try to make something that sounds like noise instead of let's just make some noise. Like their concepts of keeping time and even harmony were so formalized that even when they took the rules away or imposed rules that said don't do these rules, they couldn't do that. And I think that's like a culture thing. I think that the reason that we'll never see Hendrix or Eddie Van Halen or Skrillex in the conservatory or come out of the conservatories because all of those things come out of breaking rules and having a very uh, personalized relationship with their instruments, and also not being of the culture of the conservatory. Like even like they can explore freely because they don't even have the constraints.
Yeah, I think that's the irony of not um, learning to create through the conservatory. It allows more creative freedom because there is no to a degree that but it's also a person has to then learn the foundation by themselves, which can go multiple directions. But if they're going to be good, then it's usually that they have an intuitive understanding of their their medium theory, their chosen mediums theory. Which with like
I'm trying.
David Lynch, he was trained as a visual artist and transitioned to film, so it's like he wasn't trained as a filmmaker directly, but it applies the the creative understanding of you how to use your tools applies to or it at least it applied for him in a way that allowed him to transition.
I wondered what the impetus to transition from still photography or still images to moving images is, because I never felt some pull to, or never felt a push towards video like that. I always wanted to take my time and adjust the lights, or move an object a few centimeters, because I didn't want to move my camera.
I mean, I think it's like it's the same thing, it's the same idea but with a sequence
Yeah,
instead of just a frame, because it's like you still need mise en scène. It's all the same concepts except for movement, and it's like this weird overlay of a theatrical stage with the framing of a photograph. And so the way that's why to me it's interesting, the way film or animation artists use their visual space, as well as the way still photographers use visual space.
yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean, the more action you have, even in a still, like the less detail you're ultimately going to be able to put into it. There's too much going on, then there's no focus. And like sports photography, that stuff is actually really fascinating to me, because that's like the most blurred out, incoherent backgrounds. I guess bird photography is the same. A lot of wildlife photography, but there's like no background. It's just a wash of sometimes no colors, just black and white, and then you have this object frozen in a visual space.
well, and this I think this gets to the different styles.
But like with video, with
Um,
you can have all of that stuff in focus now. Everything, even the whole crowd. So when they do like when they select one frame to publish, like everyone in the grandstand, like even with auto racing where they're going like hundreds of miles an hour, or that's they get the whole grandstand sometimes. That stuff blows my mind. Like video cameras today are just amazing, especially since they've managed to get them somewhat smaller than they were just 30, 40 years ago. Although when I was at a baseball game, we were near a camera, and that thing was just gigantic.
well, and with the cameras, especially for broadcast, a lot of them are artificially bigger so they don't shake.
Oh yeah, well, yeah,
So it's like
gigantic image stabilization
yeah,
systems.
the cameras don't have to be that big, or like the ones that were being carried on people's shoulders, like they didn't have to be that large, but part of designing them for that size was just yeah, it's like a built-in stabilizer. Um,
What's crazy now is like I think it was like a decade ago. In the medium format microcosm, they were a lot of the big names like Phase One and Hasselblad. They were doing this thing where they were taking this already gigantic sensor, but then they would do this like basically, you know, oversampling where they would just capture the image from different sections of the pixel groups, and then composite all that stuff so they'd have even greater dynamic range and detail and all that stuff. And then they also incorporated like in-body image stabilization, which allowed the lenses to just shrink. And these are big cameras. Medium format's a huge camera, just for stills. But like I remember this stuff, and then it like started trickling down into smaller cameras where in-body stabilization just completely changed everything. And just like watching that kind of technological development was just fascinating, because before everything had to be done like in the lens. You'd have these giant lenses that just eat batteries because they'd have to spool up to have the gyroscopic stabilization factor. And now they just vibrate the sensor. It's nuts. And somehow the sensor knows, like, oh yeah, well, I mean, it knows because it has an inner ear and it can tell which direction it's traveling. But even then, that stuff's so impressive. Actually, I remember the first time I heard about an inner ear being used in a hard drive, and it was back when compact was still a thing. This guy had this compact laptop that could rotate the screen around and turn it into like a tablet type thing, and dude dropped it, and you know everyone's standing around like, oh my god, because we'd all, you know, grown up with this, you know, like having reconciled, hey, if we even like tap this thing too hard, it might just die. And and he's just like, oh no, it's cool, this thing's got an inner ear, and starts shaking it. I think I was like 20, and I to this day that's like the closest I've ever come to having like a heart attack. And now hard drives are made of, you know, silicon wafers, and you can shake the shit out of them. And the only thing you really risk is like, you know, prematurely wearing out a portion of the bearing in your fan. Which, by the way, in modern laptops is still a huge pain in the ass to get to, if not even greater pain in the ass than it ever was before. But a fan is like, you can still get your data off of that thing.
Right. I think the fans are the only moving parts of my computer, my laptop.
Yeah, fans and hinges.
Right.
Everything else is like
inside.
Yeah, like there's no more moving parts. Like shock is more of an issue of, is it enough of a shock to bend the chassis so that the motherboard itself gets messed up or contact with something.
Well, and as long as you don't bend any pins, it's like,
Yeah.
the shock is, if something's not on and moving, and it gets like there's some sort of
Impact of some kind. It doesn't
impact
even
shock.
matter.
Yeah, it doesn't really matter
Like,
as long as nothing gets bent.
pretty sure most laptop manufacturers all are proud of their like ability to drop their laptops from like desk height with no incident.
Well, and it's the same thing with game controllers. Like, watching the drop test is not something I want to try, but like, it makes me feel much better about, oh shit, if I drop my controller, you know, from my desk or whatever, it's like, it sounds bad, but they're actually.
Do you remember when Nintendo was making the most robust and like screen breaking controllers?
Oh yeah, yeah.
That's cracked me up so much, just watching somebody like, you know, having a meltdown playing a Nintendo game and then breaking their television, or getting too into like Punch Out and then punching their television.
Well, and it makes me wonder if having a gyroscope in a device also acts like an impact damper, if it gets impacted.
Oh, that's wild. Yeah, it just spins it off.
Yeah, exactly. It might have been An unintended side effect.
Or because it's spinning it artificially increases the impact velocity at the point of impact. It transfers some additional rotational force somehow.
Or it just directs it all into whatever it impacts with, like
Yeah.
no matter what.
You know, it's funny. I'm looking at this like Xbox controller that I've got, and I think I've dropped this thing. It's wired, so I can never get too far, but I'm pretty sure that it's fallen out of my lap, you know, like 100 times. It just looks polished where my hands are on it. Controllers are better than they ever have been, though.
We are really in the best hardware timeline for the consumer. Like the stuff I have in my home, when I was a kid, it would have cost thousands of dollars to have, and it's like all of the actual like like the controller stuff.
It's still probably thousands of dollars, but it's like a fraction.
No,
not for
the controller stuff.
Oh no, I'm just. Like, I mean for the total. Like it's still probably thousands of dollars, but it's still like you know a less than 50% percentage of what that would have been when we were kids.
But even at that, it's like with what I have in all of my machines now, it would have been maybe 4 arcade machines when we were kids. And that's like the arcade machines that only have one ROM and not the Neo Geo ones that have like up to 100 games on them. So it's like seeing how much the cost to game has dropped relatively, because Nintendo games were still $50, $60 when we were kids. So that's like by inflationary standards, they were probably like what Grand Theft Auto is gonna be. Grand Theft Auto 6 is gonna cost, but just regular games were that much. So I truly think we are in the best gaming timeline right now, but that doesn't necessarily like equate
Super
to
Mario
a better gaming
Brothers
experience.
Wonder is still $40 to $60 for the latest Mario game.
Yeah, I think the most expensive Switch games are up to like 70 or 80 now.
Let's find out.
Like the brand new first day, but they don't have that many as the issue. Switch 2.
It's $115 for the latest Zelda.
Did you say 115?
Yeah, at Best Buy.
Jesus Christ! Oh, I wonder if it's the deluxe edition though. Please say it's the deluxe edition.
I'm gonna find out now because that's kind of crazy.
Oh my god.
No.
Oh no. Oh no. Nintendo people are ruining the fucking market because they'll buy anything is the problem.
No, it's definitely not the deluxe edition.
Oh no. Well, at the same time, I feel like that's then only affecting Switch users. Because I see in the Steam PC market, they'll try to release a game at $70 and then they'll have to discount it 2 months later because it won't sell as many copies at that price. No game is gonna sell that many copies.
The deluxe edition costs $155.
Jesus Christ! Oh my god! Oh, that's the type of shit. That's the type of shit that makes me hate Nintendo players. Like,
we have the best third-person game ever. It's called Zelda.
Well, and they'll pay $155 for some shit that's not even photorealistic, and you're like, what do you guys do? And not to say that photorealism is the peak of gaming, but that is insane. I don't pay full price for video games because whether it's console or PC, they're gonna be broken at first. So you're better off just
Oh yeah, it's
waiting and
definitely
getting them on
$80.
sale.
It's $79.99 at Nintendo from Nintendo. So
Dog, the Kirby game is fucking $70. Resident Evil, $90. What? What is wrong with Nintendo? Hades 2, $50. It's not even $50. Like, bro, that game has never been $50. It's always been $29.99. That's the most it's ever cost on PC,
Super
which is,
Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury. Someone's trying to sell that on eBay for $194.
bro, Nintendo players are getting ripped off in a way that doesn't even make sense. Hades 2 has never cost over $29.99. And in fact, it hit $23.99 during the Christmas season.
The collector's edition of Alien Isolation, the collection, is $340.
What? That game is so old. It's like 11 years old. Or maybe six. I forget. It's either 2017 or 2014.
Here's
One
somebody
of the
trying
two.
to sell a refurbished copy. How do you refurbish a disc? Or anyways, a refurbished Nintendo Metroid Dread for $150.
Oh, this makes me want to throw up. This is like the idea that people are out here gaming this way and they're paying this much over market price for a fucking Nintendo seal that doesn't add anything. That's disgusting. This is disgusting. This is like one of the worst displays of middleman. I'm not adding anything, but I'm jacking up the price I've ever seen. And then that there's people who buy it because they don't know how to use a computer. They don't know how to use a computer good enough to go on fucking Steam and realize you don't need a super computer to play Hades 2.
Oh, someone's trying to sell Mario Kart for $80 too. Wait a second, you can play Mario Kart for free. Yeah, Mario Kart Tour. It's a free Mario Kart for your Android or your Apple device. Super Mario Kart.
And it's like
online for free.
I understand that a PC entry level or entry point is higher than a console, obviously, but the issue is that it outlasts generations of consoles when you do it right. So that's where I'm like, this PC that I'm on, because and it additionally, nobody's 8K gaming.
So did you hear that Nvidia is gonna bring the 3060 fabs back online? Because
of course.
Because it turns out that the 3060 was like peak Nvidia capability.
Yep, that 30 series is. I mean, it's not even peak capability. It's peak capability crossed with the peak production of gaming.
Yeah.
In that no gaming company is outputting anything that needs more than a 30 series. You don't need a 40 series. You don't need a 50 series because no game is that GPU intensive at this point. And I don't know if game companies don't just arbitrarily start going to 8K textures, then games may never need to go past a 30 series in for the next 5 years. And this is one of those things where, again, it's like that's the difference between PC gaming versus console gaming, whereas the GPU can handle different engines, but the console may not be able to handle those upgrades. So it's like seeing how much like the limited window that consoles have, I guess if I was buying it for a child who was only going to have the attention span for that console's life, that's one thing. But if somebody's trying to game perpetually, getting tied to an individual console doesn't make sense in modern times. Like it just, even for exclusives only last on the consoles for a year now. So all the fucking PlayStation exclusives, yeah, just wait a year.
I can't think of any exclusive content that's been released in the last 10 years that didn't end up on a computer, or I just don't even play those games. Like I haven't played a new Mario game in so long. The last Mario game I played was Mario Sunshine. I think I played a more recent version of Mario Kart. The actual most recent version of Mario Kart that I played was free. It was online. Like the fun Nintendo games, the thing that makes Nintendo games fun is playing with other people. It's not collecting a $300 fucking game. What the
Right? It feels like they really lost their way.
I think they all lost their way. I'm actually trying
Yeah.
to think of the last time I had a lot of fun just playing a new game that didn't involve a freaking like class where I had to take notes on how to play the game before I even got out of the tutorial.
Well, okay, I'll give you an example. Have you heard of Dragon Age, the series?
I think so. I don't think I've ever
So their
played it.
most recent game, they just had a sale. I bought it on sale, and I'm like, I had been hesitant to pick it up because there was, people people have a lot of opinions about different things, and you never know where it's coming from. So I'm always like, I'll just pick it up on sale. And so then I ended up spending like fucking 4 hours just designing my character because the character design on PC is so in depth. Where I'm like, I had to like cut myself off because you could you can basically create yourself with the character design if you take enough time. And I'm like, it got to the point where I'm like, if I'm gonna play this game for like 60 or 70 hours, I'm gonna design a character that looks like me. And now when I'm playing it, I'm like, I glance at the screen, I'm like, holy fuck, that's me. And then it's like one of those things where that's not the only part. The gameplay is very fun. So then there's elements about it where I've already got my money's worth,
Yeah.
but it's because I didn't pay full price. And this is to me where as long as I get my money's worth, I'm happy. But it's way easier to do that when I'm not paying fucking $70. So I don't pay $70. It's a very simple equation, and I it has not failed me yet. Like just only buying games on sale. I'm always in Rob Schneider mode where I'm like, it could be good, it could be bad. I may play it, I may not, but I didn't pay full price, so I'm cool.